Hello, I'm Tony Goldstone, and in this video I'm going to talk through the final of the three basic tabs, which is the Change Analyzer tab. So I'm just going to do a little recap of the other two steps, just because it's relevant to talk through this step. So in the initial step 1 tab, we went through the minimum data set. And I'm just going to talk through the demographics of the standard example before we move on to Change Analyzer. So this is a 40-year-old consultant in 2018 in the 1995 scheme with 14 years of legacy pension. He's got no added years, and he transitioned over like most consultants in the 2015 scheme. In addition to his normal NHS salary, he's got a CEA Level 4 award. And in terms of non-pensionable pay, he's got £50,000. And that comprises 2 additional PAs, so that would be 20% of his pensionable pay. So that's around £22,000 or £23,000. And then the remainder of that is additional income, and that could be income within the NHS, for example, waiting list initiatives. It could be private practice, it could be income from elsewhere, such as property. And then for the purposes of the future, we've assumed that nothing has changed. So he continues to earn £50,000 on top of his basic pensionable salary. He doesn't get any other pensionable pay rises, such as promotion or CA or non-pensionable CA awards. The only changes that we've put in are his default increments. So it's critically important, once you've put in your own figures, that you complete the validation step. And the most important thing to check is that your values match generally within £1 on the TRS side of this tab. And once you've done both of those things, put in your data and done the step 1B validation, you can then go into this tab, which is the Change Analyzer tab. So I'm just going to spend some time talking you through the components of this, and then we'll run some different scenarios just so you can see how this works. So the first thing is a disclaimer on the top, which again says that you must model your own exact numbers, and you can't make any generalizations about pensions, and that's really important to note. So just because the person sat next to you might be able to increase their pension by dropping a session, that doesn't necessarily apply to you. So everybody needs to model their own exact position. So in the Change Analyzer, this is a way of quickly seeing how changes to your income, either pensionable income, and the only way you can easily change your pensionable income is by going part-time, or by changing your non-pensionable pay, you can affect your taxation and pension position. So you can do all of that in this Change Analyzer section. But we also have a very important desired pension age, and that's because the model most accurately predicts your pension and taxation position at the age which you tell it you want to retire at. And that's because this complicated way that scheme pays works, you need to tell it an exact age at retirement for the model to be able to very accurately work out what your scheme pays would be based on the assumptions at that age. So the default position is a retirement age of 60, which in the recent BMA survey showed that very few people, under 5%, wanted to work till 65 or later. So in this section, this will show your pension at whichever age you've set up here. So as I've said, this has been set at 60 by default, but you can change this in the drop down to whichever age you want to go at, from 55 to 68. And then once you update that and the figures update, you'll see a pension summary. So at the top, in the sign values, these are the values that you see on your TRS statement at the age you want to retire and at state pension age. But it's very important to appreciate that virtually nobody will get the value on their TRS value. And that's because, as we just said, more than 95% of people will take early retirement. And again, lots of people will be forced into using scheme pays, and there will also be a reduction from scheme pays and or lifetime allowance. This green line just reiterates from the first screen what you said your target pension was. So we said our target pension initially was £50,000, and we can see by the time we're 60 After inflation, that's worth £76,000. And we can see then in this section the 4 models that we discuss in each of the 4 videos covering these models, what your pension would be at that age, and also what your taxation would be. So you can choose a default model which is highlighted, and for the purposes of this video we've chosen the scheme pays all, and that's because most consultants won't be able to afford to pay these very large annual allowance bills every year, so many will be forced to use the scheme pays option. However, if you are able to pay your bills, you could, for example, change that to self-pay, and you can see the highlighted option has changed to self-pay. But we'll just pop that back to scheme pays all for now. So within this table we can see the amount of tax that you would be paying if you were using AA Self, and because we've said scheme pays all, there is no taxation charge paid by the consultants in this column. But instead, at 60, this consultant has accrued a loan worth almost £500,000. And if, for example, we change that to 68, we can see that that value has gone to 950,000 or almost £1 million. And then that's also caused a lifetime allowance charge. But we'll just put that to 60 again. And we can see within this model, this consultant, if they went at 60 using scheme pays, would have a pension of £55,000. But it's important to note that that's 20 years away. So this gives the value in today's money, accounting for all the inflation between now and then. So that would be a pension for this consultant in today's terms of about £36,600. In this bottom section, there's a discussion about scheme pays, and it's just to explain the cost of scheme pays as an equivalent pension contribution. So, for example, it says that if you use scheme pays until 68, that would be almost £1 million or £952,000. So that's equivalent to an additional pension contribution of 23%. So that's in addition to the 14.5% of their pensionable pay that this consultant will be paying. So you can see that the cost of the pension is dwarfed from the scheme pays charges compared to the standard pension contribution. So then if we just move over to these graphs, I'll just scroll over so we can see the 4 main graphs. So we can see here this is perhaps the most important graph, and this is a graph that shows the annual allowance charge by year. And rather than calendar year, we've done it by age. So we can see, for example, if this consultant goes at age 60, he's got an annual allowance bill in that year of almost £25,000. And you can see that there's this line that goes up. And this line goes up because of the revaluation component of the 2015 scheme, whereby your pot is revalued each year by CPI plus 1.5%. And then we can also see that there's some peaks. So for example here at age 43, 48 and 53, with that bill there of £26,000. And those peaks relate to the consultant's increments every 5 years. So that's the annual allowance taxed by year, and it's important to realise that these values are paid from your net pay. So if you've got to pay that bill of £26,000, that's coming from your taxed income rather than your pre-tax gross income. So then in this bottom graph, we can see the cumulative tax. And in the red, we can see the self-pay option. So if this consultant was to go at 60, you can see that he's got a self-pay bill of £351,000, and that's the same as that value there. However, if he uses scheme pays, he's got a loan of £494,000, which is the same as this value here. And then there's also some graphs which just show your predicted pension using all of the different models. Or alternatively, the one that I prefer is looking at your pensions at present day value, because it can be misleading to think that you're going to go with a pension of £55,000, because of course that's worth far less in today's terms. So that gets back to that value of £36,649. So then you'll see that there's two buttons here, and these buttons will only work if you have used the model in Google Sheets. They don't work if you're in Excel. So the first time you run the script, it may also ask you about permissions, and you need to press this Prep Analyzer button. And all Prep Analyzer does is it allows you to take control of your pension by changing the values here, as opposed to on the front sheet. And again, once you've got all of these set how you want them to do, if you press the Reset button, that will give a baseline position. So our baseline position for this model is, as we said, age 60, working full-time, and that £50,000 reflects that the consultant is doing 12 PAs, so about £25,000 of that approximately is due to the 12 PAs, and £25,000 of income from outside the NHS or waiting list initiatives, etc. So having established a baseline position, we can now change it and see what would happen if we do something else. So for example, that value of £50,000 was based on working 12 PAs. And if we want to model what would happen if we use 10 PAs, we can decrease that by £25,000. So 50,000 minus 25,000 is £25,000. And then we can see it recalculates all of these graphs. So now we've made that change and reduced that to £25,000, we can see that this graph has updated. So we can see the baseline position was the triangles, and that has high levels of tax, and then the new position is the crosses, and that has significantly lower amounts of tax. So even though we've not changed pensionable pay, we've only changed non-pensionable pay. Because of the effect of tapering, you can see that this consultant has stayed out of tax for longer, and then all their subsequent tax bills are lower, and significantly so. So this was the annual allowance by year, and then this is the cumulative position. So we can see here, if the consultant was self-paying, that has gone from £350,000 down to £28,000. That consultant has saved £70,000 in cumulative tax. Or similarly, if they were using scheme pays, we've gone from a position at 60 of £494,000 down to £375,000. And if we extrapolate that up to 68, we've gone from £952,000 down to £784,000. So he saved approximately £250,000 off his scheme pays loan just by reducing the amount of non-pensionable pay. So the other modification you can make to model your pension is by changing your pensionable pay. And there are two ways of changing your pensionable pay for the purposes of your pension calculation. One is by using the hokey option, and that is by coming in and out of the pension scheme. And that I will discuss in a separate model. But the other way is by going less than full time. So you'll remember that the triangles were based on 12 PAs, and that was with non-pensionable pay of £50,000. The crosses now are based on the 10 PA position, but keeping that £25,000 of income from elsewhere. But now let's see what happens by going less than full time. And I'll just come back again to this disclaimer on the top. You need to make sure that you model your own exact position, because the effect will be different for every individual consultant. So if we go from 100% down to 90%, and then wait for this graph to update, and we can see what's happened. So now the consultant has come out of the annual allowance tax till they're about 47, and then all the subsequent bills are subsequently much lower. And again, if we look at the cumulative position, we can see that that's gone from a scheme pays loan by state pension aids of £952,000 all the way down to £549,000. So it saved about £400,000 in tax by making those two changes of going, dropping the two additional PAs and then dropping one of his pensionable PAs. So let's look at the position with pensions, and to do that I'm just going to make this slightly larger. So on this graph, the triangles is the baseline position and the crosses is the new position. So if we look at red, which was the self-pay position, if the consultant paid the annual allowance tax himself, the baseline position was a £51,000 pension, and that comes down slightly to £49,000 if he reduces his income by going part-time. However, if they use scheme pays, because that loan has come down a great deal, his pension has gone up. So the baseline position with scheme pays was a pension of £36,648, and if we look at his pension by going part-time, it's increased significantly to £42,400. So if we just zoom out again, and then we just keep on going and look at the effect of a further pension reduction, and if we go down to 80% and then look over at this graph, we can see that that tax has fallen away yet further. So he's now out of taxation for annual allowance until age 52, and then all of the subsequent ones are significantly lower. And if we look at the cumulative tax position at state pension age, that's gone from £942,000, that enormous loan, down to a position of £330,000. So some £600,000 less of a scheme pays loan to pay off. And you can see the effect that's had on pension. So using scheme pays, has gone from a pension of £36,000 in today's money up to a pension of £43,000. So a very significantly higher pension. And that is maintained all the way up for this particular consultant down to 70%. So he still gets a significantly larger pension of £64,000 compared to that original pension based on 12 PAs, you'll recall, was £55,000. But just to reiterate once again, you can't make any generalisations as to this for your own position, and it's crucially important that you put your own values in. So that is the change analyzer step, and as I said, I will discuss the Hokey option in a future video. Thank you.